"What do they pay a man to stand there and do nothing?" the tall one asked, and he asked it loud enough that he meant for Eddings to hear, which was the whole point of asking it that way at all. I was 20 feet off on the cold side of the forecourt where the catering vans were unloading, and I heard it too, and 40 years fell off me in a second. I knew that voice. Not the man, I had never seen him before in my life, but the kind of voice. The kind that has never once stood between anything and anything, and has decided that makes it the smartest voice in the room. There were 3 of them, in suits cut close and shoes that had never crossed a parade ground. Bankers, or what passes for bankers at a charity gala, the men who move other men's money and take a slice off the top of every motion. They had stepped out into the autumn evening to smoke and to feel important, and they had found Corporal James Eddings standing his post at the foot of the east stair, in the red wool and the tall black bearskin, white gloves flat at his sides, eyes forward, a ceremonial rifle at his shoulder. And to them he was furniture. He was a coat-rack with a pulse. "My name is Tom Harlow. I am old now, old enough that young men hold doors for me and I let them. And on the night I am telling you about I was a guest at the gala only because a kinder man than I deserved had put my name on the list. I had served 31 years and buried friends in 3 countries. And I had spent the last decade of my working life beside the man those 3 bankers had just decided was nothing. Though I will get to that, because the order I tell this in matters. So let me tell it the way it happened. The gala was at Marlcroft House, which is not a palace though the brochures lean on the word. It is a great pale stone pile at the edge of the city, all gilded railings and a forecourt of gray cobbles worn smooth, and on state and charity occasions the household lends a ceremonial detail to stand the doors. That is what Eddings was that night. One of 4 guardsmen posted to make the evening feel like an occasion, to give the arriving money a wall of discipline to walk past, so it could feel for one night that it had touched something older and harder than itself. Eddings drew the east stair. I knew because I had watched him take the post an hour earlier, watched him set his feet and go still in the way I had seen him go still 1,000 times, the way that is not laziness and is not absence, but is a man holding himself at the exact center of his own attention, ready, the whole engine of him idling at a perfect low hum. Most people cannot tell the difference between a man standing there and a man standing guard. The bankers certainly could not. "Seriously," the tall one said. He had a glass of something pale in his hand, and he turned to share the joke with his 2 friends, who were ready to laugh because laughing at the right moment is most of what their friendship was. "Look at him. 40 grand a year, probably less, to wear a dead bear on his head and not scratch his nose. That's the whole career. That's it." "It's a costume job," said the second one, shorter, softer, with the wet smile of a man who agrees for a living. "It's tourism. They've got a guy in there." He tipped his glass at the great doors, "managing more money tonight than this kid'll see in 10 lifetimes. And the kid's job is to stand outside and be a photo." "Hey," the tall one stepped closer to Eddings. I felt my own weight shift, the old instinct, the one that puts you on the balls of your feet before your mind has caught up. "Hey, toy soldier, you in there." Eddings did not move. Of course he did not move. The point of the post is that he does not move, and the men who do not understand that mistake it every time for the thing being easy. They think stillness is the absence of effort. They have it exactly backward. Stillness like that is the most effort a body can spend without spending it on motion, and I have known strong men who could march 30 miles under a full load and could not hold that post for 20 minutes without their eyes beginning to slide. The tall one waved a hand in front of Eddings' face, slow, theatrical, the way you check if someone is asleep. "Nothing," he announced, delighted. "Nobody home. 40 grand for nobody home. And here is the thing I want you to hold on to, because it is the hinge of the whole night." Eddings could have ended it. Not with his hands, he would never, not on that post, not for a fool with a drink. But there was a thing he could have said, a thing he could have shown them, that would have wiped those 3 smiles off 3 soft faces faster than a slap. He had it on him. He had it on his chest, under the ceremonial dressing, a single thing that the tall one would have wept to be allowed to touch. He said nothing. He showed them nothing. He stood his post and let them have their little evening at his expense, because the man understood something the bankers would not have understood if you carved it into their foreheads, that what he was guarding was not the door. I will tell you what he was guarding. But first I have to tell you how I came to know this man at all, because a stranger watching that forecourt would have seen only a young guardsman being mocked, and the truth was a great deal older and a great deal stranger than that. I met James Eddings 11 years before that gala, in a place I am not permitted to name and would not name if I were, a place where the air was the color of rust, and the only green thing for 100 miles was a single hand-painted shutter on a ruined house that someone had loved once. I was a senior man by then, past the age when they send you forward, kept on for what I knew rather than what I could still do. Eddings was young. He was the quietest man in a company of quiet men, and in that line of work quiet is not a personality, it is a discipline, and you learn to read the difference between a man who has nothing to say and a man who has decided that saying it costs more than it is worth. Eddings was the second kind. I want to be careful here, because the kind of work we did is not the point of this story, and I will not dress it up to thrill you. It is enough to say that there are jobs a nation needs done that it cannot put on a poster, and there are men who do those jobs and come home and never tell a soul. Eddings was one of those men. So was I. The difference between us was that I came home loud and stayed loud, and Eddings came home and went so quiet that you might have mistaken the quiet for emptiness if you had not been there to see what filled it. There was one night in particular. I'm not going to lay it out scene by scene, because some of it is still not mine to give away and some of it I do not want to carry back into the light, but I will tell you the shape of it. A mission went wrong in the way these things go wrong, fast and total, and without anyone to blame, which is the worst way, because a man can live with an enemy and cannot live nearly as well with bad luck. We were pinned. We had wounded. The way out had become the way in, and the clock that mattered was the clock on the man bleeding worst, who happened that night to be me. I do not remember most of what came after because I was busy losing a great deal of blood, and the mind is merciful about such things. What I remember is this. The smart move, the move the manual would have endorsed, the move no one alive would have faulted him for, was to leave me. I was the senior man. I had had my years. The math of it was clean, and the answer was that you do not trade 3 young men's certain future for one old man's bad odds. And I remember a voice in my ear, very calm, the calmest voice I have ever heard in my life, saying, "We're not doing that." That was all. We're not doing that. And then a long time of being carried, and a longer time of a man putting his own body between me and the things that wanted to finish me. And at the end of it, a daylight I had not expected to see, and 4 of us alive who, by every honest reckoning, should have been 2. I learned the rest in the hospital, in pieces, from men who would lower their voices when I came up in conversation, the way men do about a thing that frightened them. What Eddings did that night, the choices he made, the things he stood in front of, the simple refusal at the center of all of it, was the kind of thing that, in the old days, they would have made a story of. And in fact, they did make a thing of it, a quiet thing, the way the service makes quiet things of the loud ones, behind closed doors and away from cameras. They gave him the highest decoration the nation has for valor under arms. I will not use its real name because it does not need one. In our service, we did not say the name out loud anyway. We just called it the cross, the way you call the only one of a thing by its plainest word. 3 living men wore it on the day I am telling you about. James Eddings was one of them. He never wore it. That is the part the bankers could not have known and would not have believed. A man can earn the highest honor his country can give and then choose to wear a costume and stand a door for 40 grand a year, and let 3 fools wave a hand in his face and call him nobody home. And I am here to tell you that this is not weakness, and it is not even humility exactly, though humility is in it. It is something harder to name, and the naming of it is the whole reason I am telling you any of this. So picture the forecourt again. The bankers warming to their sport, the young guardsman still, and me, 20 feet off in a borrowed suit with a cane I pretend I do not need, watching a man I owed my life to be treated like a co-track, and deciding, God forgive me, to wait, to see what he would do. Because I knew what was coming up the long drive, and I knew that the night was about to become a very different night, and I am ashamed to say that some old, hard part of me wanted those three men to be standing exactly where they were standing when it came. The tall one's name, I would learn later, was Vance. By the next morning I knew all three of their names and what they were worth, but on the night they were just the tall one, the soft one, and the third, a younger man, very polished, who had not laughed at the first jokes, and who I think was the only one of the three with the sense to be uneasy. He kept glancing at the great doors as if he expected someone to come out and tell them to stop. No one did. The staff were trained to be invisible. The other guests were inside being important at one another. And so the forecourt belonged to the bankers and the boy in the bearskin, and the bankers took full possession of it. Vance had circled around to Edding's side now, close, too close, inside the foot of space that a guardsman's whole training tells him to defend, and that he is forbidden, on a ceremonial post like that one, to defend with anything but his stillness. I have stood that kind of post. I know exactly what it costs to feel a man's breath on your cheek and his contempt in your ear, and to let it land and not answer, because the answering is not yours to give. The discipline is not that you do not feel it. The discipline is that you feel all of it, and you choose the post over the feeling every second, for as many seconds as the post requires. I'm going to make him laugh, Vance announced. 20 says I make him laugh. You'll get him in trouble, the polished one said quietly. It was the first thing he had said. He's not going to get in trouble, he's a tourist attraction. Watch. And Vance leaned in and began to murmur things at the side of Edding's face. I will not repeat them, not because they were filthy but because they were small. The small mean nothings a man says when he has decided another man is not real enough to be owed manners. He called him names. He invented a life for him, a sad little life, and narrated it. He held his glass up beside Edding's jaw and pretended to feed him from it. He did, in short, all the things that a man does to another man when he is certain there will be no bill for it. And Edding stood there with the whole of that long mission still inside him, with the cross he never wore still on his chest, and he let Vance write him a sad little life, and did not move to correct one word of it. I gripped my cane. I will be honest about that. There is an age past which a man should not get into a thing on cobblestones, and I am well past it, and I gripped the cane anyway and felt the old wiring light up the way it does, the part of you that does not consult the rest of you. If you have ever loved a man for saving your life, you will understand what it is to watch him be small-talked into the dirt by a stranger and to want very much to walk over and explain the situation with great clarity. I did not. I will tell you why I did not, and it is not a flattering reason. I did not because I knew that nothing I could say would be 1/10 as heavy as the thing that was coming up the drive, and I did not want to spend the moment early. That is the truth. I sat on my own honor and let it happen because I knew the bill was coming, and I wanted those three men present for the whole of it. The soft one, his name was Pell, had found a new angle. Ask him to present arms, he said. They have to if you ask right. There's a thing you say. There's no thing you say, the polished one said. There is, my cousin did it. You say it like an order and they snap to. It's automatic, they can't help it, it's drilled in. Pell turned to Eddings and squared up, mock serious, chin out, doing his idea of a parade ground voice. Guardsman, present, arms. Nothing. The autumn wind moved the bearskin's fur, a half-inch, no more. Eddings' eyes stayed level on the middle distance, on nothing, on the cold air over the heads of three men who had decided he was a vending machine for their amusement, and were now annoyed that he would not vend. See, that doesn't work, the polished one said, almost gently as if to spare Pell. It works if you outrank him, Pell said, and laughed at his own idea, and that was the line that did it for me, that landed in me like a coal. It works if you outrank him. As if rank were a thing these three could imagine the shape of. As if the boy they were tormenting were not, in the only ledger that has ever mattered to men like me and like him, so far above the three of them and everyone they had ever envied that the distance could not be spoken of in the same breath as money. I want to be fair to the bankers, because the easy version of this story makes them monsters, and they were not monsters. They were something more ordinary and, I have come to think, more dangerous. They were men to whom the world had only ever shown its soft side, and who had taken that softness for a law of nature, and who had therefore never once been required to find out what they were standing next to. They could see the money inside the doors. They could not see the man in front of them. The great cruelty of a certain kind of comfortable life is that it trains the eyes to see only the things that comfort can buy, and to look right through everything that it cannot. Eddings could see them, though. That is the part I keep coming back to. Behind that level gaze, the man was reading those three the way he read everything, completely, quietly, giving away nothing. I knew his face well enough by then to know that he had taken the full measure of Vance and Pell and the polished one in the first 10 seconds, had filed them, and had decided that they were not a threat to the door and were therefore not his concern. He was not enduring them. He had simply assigned them their correct and very small place in the order of things that mattered, and gone on guarding what he was there to guard. What was he guarding? I told you I would say. He was not guarding the door is a door, and there were locks and there were other men for the door. He was guarding the idea that a thing can be done right for its own sake. That is not a grand way to put it, and I have tried to find a grander one, and there is not a grander one that is also true. He stood that post perfectly because standing it perfectly was the job, and the job deserved to be done right whether anyone was watching, whether anyone deserved it, whether the men in front of him were kings or were fools with cocktails. The standard does not bend to the audience. That was the whole of his creed, and it was the same creed that had carried me out of a country the color of rust on his back 11 years before, and the bankers were standing 6 inches from it and could not feel the heat. Then the cars began to come up the drive for the late arrivals, and I felt the night start to turn. The first 2 were what you would expect. Long dark cars, a flutter of staff with umbrellas though it was not raining, a couple swathed in evening dress who climbed the west stair and were swallowed by the doors. The bankers paid them no attention, except that Vance straightened his jacket out of instinct, the way a man does when he senses money arriving that might be larger than his own. The third car was older. I noticed it before I understood why I had noticed it. It was a plain, dark thing, well kept but not new, the kind of car a man drives when he has nothing left to prove with a car, and it did not pull up to the grand stairs at all. It stopped at the far end of the forecourt, near the catering vans near me, and a single elderly man got out of the back of it without waiting for anyone to open his door. I did not know him by sight. I want that on the record, because the part of the story that follows is going to sound as if it were arranged, and it was not arranged, and I would not have you think old soldiers run a club where we wave one another in. I had never seen the man in my life, but I knew the type the way I had known the type of Vance's voice, and the type was the exact opposite. He was tall and gone thin with age, in a dark overcoat over a dark suit with no decoration on it at all, and he moved slowly because his knees had clearly had enough of him, and he carried himself in a way that I can only describe like this. He carried himself like a man who had spent his life being the most important person in rooms and had grown completely tired of it, and now wanted only to be left alone to walk where he was going. He set off across the forecourt toward the great doors, on the long diagonal that would take him past the foot of the east stair, past Eddings, past the bankers. I watched him come. I will tell you that there was something in his walk that pulled my eye and would not let it go, some old freight in the careful way he set each foot down, and I found myself standing up off the low wall I had been leaning on, without deciding to, the cane forgotten in my hand. The bankers saw him too now because he was going to pass close to them, and they did the thing that men of their kind do, which is to perform a quick and silent appraisal. The coat, the shoes, the car at the wrong end of the forecourt, the absence of staff, and to arrive at a verdict. And the verdict on this slow old man in his plain dark coat was nobody, not money, not the kind of arrival worth straightening a jacket for. Vance actually turned half away back to Eddings, his sport not yet finished. "Last chance, toy soldier," Vance said. "Come on, one blink, one, I'll make it worth your—" The old man stopped. He had drawn level with the foot of the east stair, perhaps 8 feet from Eddings, and he stopped, and the stopping was so complete and so unlike the shuffling progress of the moment before that all 3 bankers turned to look at him. I turned to look at him. The whole forecourt, what there was of it, turned. The old man was looking at Eddings. Not at the costume, the bankers looked at the costume. He was looking at the man inside it, at the face under the bearskin, and I watched recognition move across his old features the way light moves across water, slow and then all at once. His mouth opened slightly. I have seen that exact thing go through men only a handful of times in my life, and every time it has been one old soldier seeing another and understanding, in a single second, the entire weight of what is standing in front of him. "It's you," the old man said. He said it very quietly. I do not think he meant for anyone but Eddings to hear it. "I was told you'd left the service. I was told you'd gone to ground." A pause, and then, even softer, almost to himself, "And here you are, standing a door." Eddings' eyes came down off the middle distance for the first time in the whole long evening. They came down and they found the old man's face, and something happened there too, some recognition running the other way. And for one moment the perfect statue of him cracked, not broke, cracked, the way good stone shows a single line under enough years, and I saw the boy in the rust-colored country, the calmest voice I had ever heard, look out through the eyes of the guardsman at the foot of the stair. "Sir," Eddings said, one word, barely a breath of it. The bankers had gone quiet. They could feel that something was happening and they could not read it, and there is nothing a man like Vance hates more than being in a room where the important thing is a thing he cannot see. He recovered fast, the way they do. "Friend of yours," Vance said to the old man with a little smile, including him in the joke, generous. "We're trying to get a rise out of the statue here. No luck. You want to try? You look like you might have done a bit of soldiering back in the day, Grandad, you tell us. Is it true they just stand there? Is that the whole job, 40 grand to stand there?" And the old man turned his head slowly and looked at Vance. I have been looked at like that perhaps twice in my life, and both times I deserved it, and I remember both times better than I remember my own wedding. It is a look with no anger in it at all, which is what makes it unsurvivable. Anger would have given Vance something to push against. This was not anger. This was a very old, very tired man taking the exact and complete measure of a very young, very foolish one, and finding, with neither cruelty nor surprise, that there was almost nothing there to measure. "Back in the day," the old man repeated. He let the words sit. "Yes, I did a bit of soldiering." "There you go," Vance said, not yet understanding, plowing forward the way the comfortable do, certain the ground will hold. "So set him straight for us. Tell him a real soldier'd be embarrassed to." "Be quiet," the old man said. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. He said be quiet the way a man says it who has said it to 10,000 men over 50 years, and has never once had to say it twice. And the 2 words went out across the cobbles, and Vance's mouth closed around whatever he had been about to say and stayed closed. The soft one, Pell, took a small step backward without seeming to know he had done it. The polished one had gone very still and very pale, and I understood, watching him, that the polished one was the only one of the 3 who had begun, just begun, to suspect that they had wandered in their certainty into a place they did not understand. The old man turned away from them as if they had ceased to exist, which for his purposes they had. He faced Eddings squarely. And then he did a thing that I will see behind my eyes until the day I am buried. He straightened. It cost him. I could see what it cost him, the knees, the back, the 80-some years of him protesting every inch. But he gathered all of it up out of the slow, shuffling old man, and he stood, and the years fell off him the way they had fallen off me at the sound of Vance's voice, only the other direction, and what stood in the old man's place was not a tired guest at a gala. What stood there was rank, was a lifetime, was authority of a kind that money has never once been able to buy or even to recognize, the authority of a man who has spent his whole life answering for the lives of others and has the ledger of it carved into his spine. And the general, for that is what he was, I had it by then. You could not have stood in the forecourt and not had it. The general raised his right hand, slowly, deliberately, every joint of it complaining, and he held it, and he brought it up in a salute to the young guardsman standing his door for 40 grand a year. You have to understand what you were seeing. A general does not salute a corporal. The salute runs the other way. That is the whole grammar of it. The junior renders honor to the senior, and it is so deep in the bones of every man who has ever worn the cloth that to see it run backward is to see water climb a wall. A general saluting a guardsman is a sentence in a language the bankers did not speak, but they could feel that it meant something enormous, and they stood there in the cold trying to read a thing they had no letters for. But I had the letters, and there was only one reason on this earth that a general of his years would break the grammar of 50 years and render the honor upward to a corporal at a door. The salute does not run to the rank. In a handful of cases, the handful you can count on the fingers of 2 hands across a whole nation, the salute runs to the decoration. When a man wears the highest award the country gives for valor, every other man in uniform salutes him first, regardless of rank, general or private, because the honor outranks them all. It is not a courtesy. It is a law older than any of their careers, and the whole institution agrees to bow its head to that one thing, because that one thing is the proof that the institution is worth anything at all. The general was saluting the cross. He could not see it. Eddings was not wearing it. He never wore it. It was not on the red wool tunic for any eye to find. But the general did not need to see it. He had seen the man, and he had known the man, and he had known God knows how, from what briefing room or what list of names that men like us are never shown. Exactly what that quiet corporal had done in a country the color of rust, and what the nation had given him for it in a small room with the cameras off. And so the general stood in front of a guardsman that 3 bankers had spent 20 minutes calling nobody home, and he rendered, slowly and at great cost to his old body, the single most weighted gesture one soldier can give another. Eddings came to attention. There is attention and there is attention, and what Eddings did was the second kind, the kind that has a man's entire history standing up inside him all at once. The ceremonial rifle came across. The heels came together with a single sound, sharp as a shot, that bounced off the pale stone of Marlcroft House and rang in the cold. And the boy I had carried, no, the boy who had carried me, returned the general's salute with a precision that made everything the bankers thought they had been watching all evening look like the joke it was, because they had been watching a man stand still and had called it nothing. And now they were watching the same man move, and the movement told them without a single word that the stillness had been the discipline of someone who could do this whenever he chose and chose, almost always not to. The 2 of them held the salute, an old general at the end of a long road and a young guardsman who had earned the right to be saluted by anyone alive, holding it in the cold autumn dark while 3 bankers and 1 old wreck of a sergeant watched and did not breathe. Then the general brought his hand down, and his face, which had been all rank and ceremony, became an old man's face again, and it was kind. "At ease, corporal," he said softly. "You're off the clock with me. You always will be." "Thank you, sir," Eddings said, and then, because he was who he was, he added, "You shouldn't have stood for me, sir, your knees." My knees, the general said, can carry me to my grave, but they'll carry you there first if I let them tell me when to honor a man. A pause. I heard you'd gone quiet. I didn't know it was this quiet. He glanced just once at the bearskin, the rifle, the door. A man who did what you did, standing a gala door for, and here he turned his head, deliberate, and looked at Vance, and finished the general's sentence with the banker's own words, for 40 grand a year. It went into Vance like a blade going in slow. I watched it happen, and I will not pretend I did not enjoy it, though I am old enough now to be a little ashamed of the enjoying. The color went out of Vance's face the way it goes out of a man's face when the floor he has been standing on his whole life turns out to have been a painting of a floor. He had heard it now, the salute, the at ease, the corporal, the you always will be, and somewhere in the back of even a mind as soft as his the meaning had begun to assemble itself. I have spent 20 minutes mocking a man that a general will stand up on ruined knees to honor, and I do not know why, and not knowing why is somehow the most frightening part. Pell got there first, oddly, the soft one. He said in a small voice to no one, "Who is he?" Meaning Eddings, and the general heard it, and the general did a generous thing, or perhaps a merciless one. With men like that the two can be the same. "I'm not going to tell you who he is," the general said, turning to face all three of them now, drawing himself up again. "That's not mine to give, and it isn't yours to know, and the fact that you asked the way you asked tells me you wouldn't carry it well, but I'll tell you what he is. He is the reason a number of men who are at home tonight, asleep in their own beds beside their own wives, are not in the ground. I am one of the men who knows the number, and I am not permitted to say it, and it would stop your heart if I could." He let that sit on the cobbles. "You called his job pointless. You called it standing there and doing nothing. Son," and he said son to Vance the way you say it to a man you have decided to be patient with precisely, because he does not deserve patience. "This man has done the hardest something there is to do, and what he has chosen to do with the rest of his life is to do a small thing perfectly because the doing of it right is worth his time. You have spent your evening unable to imagine why a man would do that. That tells me everything about you, and it tells me nothing about him, and that is the whole of the difference between you." There was a silence then that I would not call comfortable for anyone in it but Eddings, who had returned to his post and gone still again, and was once more, to the casual eye, a Kotrak with a pulse, except that no eye on that forecourt was casual any more. Vance tried to speak. I will give him that much. He tried. He got as far as opening his mouth, and what came out was the beginning of an apology, or the beginning of the kind of thing a man says when he wants very badly to climb back up onto the floor that has just turned out to be a painting. "Look, we were only," he started, and the general did not even let him finish, did not even bother to silence him this time, simply turned his back, which is a worse thing than being silenced because it tells a man he is not even worth the breath of being stopped. "The young one," the general said to me, for he had clocked me by now, the old wreck on his feet by the catering vans, and old soldiers find one another across any room, that part at least is true. "The polished one. He's the only one of the three with a chance. Watch him." And then lower just to me, as he came near on his way at last to the doors he had been walking toward all along, "You're Harlow." I confess my voice did not work the first time I tried it. "Sir," I managed. "I read the file years ago, the one they wouldn't let either of you keep." He looked at me with those tired, complete old eyes. "He carried you out." "He did, sir." "And you've spent 11 years trying to find a way to pay him back, and there isn't one, and it's been eating you." It was not a question. The man had read more files than mine in his long life, and he knew the look of a debt that cannot be settled. "There isn't a way, Harlow. That's not how that kind of thing works. You don't pay it back. You stand near it for the rest of your life, and you let it remind you what a man is for." He glanced at Eddings one more time. "He's reminding the whole forecourt tonight, and they don't even know it. Good evening, Sergeant." And he went up the stair slowly on his ruined knees, and the doors took him in. I would like to tell you that the bankers were arrested, that the convoy came, that the night ended in a way you could put a bow on. It did not, because that is not the kind of story this was. No one laid a hand on Vance or Pell or the polished one. There was no need. The punishment had already been delivered, and it was the only punishment that could ever have reached men like them, which was this. For the rest of their lives they would carry the memory of a moment in which the entire scaffolding of how they measured the world, money, position, the soft verdict that some men are nobody home, had been quietly and completely demolished in front of them by an old man who never raised his voice. You cannot fine a man into understanding that. You cannot arrest it into him. It either lands or it does not, and on at least one of the three, I am told, it landed for good. They left within the half hour. Vance and Pell went first, fast, the way men leave a place where they have been made to feel the actual size of themselves, not speaking, not looking at the east stare. But the polished one, his name, I learned, was Caro, the polished one did not go straight to the cars. He hung back, and then he did the thing the general had given him a chance to do. He walked to the foot of the east stair alone, and he stood in front of Eddings, at a respectful distance this time, well outside the foot of space he had watched his friends violate all evening. And he did not say he was sorry, because he was sharp enough to know that sorry was too small and would only ask Eddings to do the work of forgiving him, which was not Eddings' job. Instead, he simply stood at attention, a civilian's clumsy idea of attention, but he meant it. You could see he meant it, and he held it for a moment, awkward and sincere in his expensive suit on the cold cobbles, his own small, clumsy salute to a thing he had spent the evening unable to see and could see now. Then he turned and walked to the cars and was gone. Eddings, of course, did not move. He held his post. The autumn wind moved the fur of the bearskin a half-inch and no more. But I was close enough by then, having drifted over the way old men drift toward the only warm thing in a cold place, and I will tell you what I saw, because I am the only one who was close enough to see it, and it is the reason I have told you all the rest. I saw the corner of his mouth, not a smile. Eddings did not smile on post. The man would sooner have flown. But there was the smallest possible easing at the corner of his mouth. The ghost of the place a smile would be if a smile were permitted, and I understood that it was not for the salute the general had given him, and it was not for the bankers being rooted, and it was not even for Caro's clumsy attempt at the end. It was for the simplest thing. It was the quiet, private satisfaction of a man who has done his job correctly for several hours in a row, in the cold, in front of people who did not deserve it, for no reward and no audience that mattered, and has done it correctly anyway, all the way through, exactly as he meant to. That was the whole of his reward, and it was enough for him. And that was the thing the bankers could never have understood, and the general understood completely, and I have spent the 11 years since trying to learn. I went home that night and I sat up a long time. I thought about a country the color of rust and a voice in my ear saying we're not doing that. I thought about a general's ruined knees and the cost of straightening them. And I thought mostly about the gap between what a man is and what the world is able to see of him, and about how the comfortable spend their whole lives certain that the two are the same thing, that what shows is what's there, that a man standing at a door for 40 grand a year must be exactly and only a man standing at a door, and about how wrong they are, how completely and dangerously wrong, and how they will go to their graves never knowing it because the proof is always standing right in front of them, in a uniform they have decided is a costume. James Eddings is still alive. He is older now as I am older, and he has long since left the door at Marlcroft House, and he still does not wear the cross, and I have long since stopped asking him to. I think I finally understand why he doesn't, and it is the thing the general was trying to tell 3 bankers who could not hear it. The decoration is not the point. The decoration is the nation's clumsy attempt to put a name and a ribbon on a thing that has no name and needs no ribbon. The plain, unglamorous, unwitnessed decision a man makes over and over, to do the hard right thing because it is right. Whether anyone is watching, whether anyone deserves it, whether the men in front of him are generals or are fools with cocktails in the cold. The quietest man on that forecourt wore the highest honor the nation had to give. He wore it under the wool where no one could see, and he stood his door, and he let 3 small men have their evening, and he was, the entire time, so far above them that they will never in their lives understand the height of it. I have stopped trying to pay him back. The general was right, there is no paying it back. I just stand near it, the way he told me to, for whatever years I have left. And when some young man in a soft suit asks me, as they sometimes do, what it is exactly that a guardsman gets paid to stand there and do, I tell him the truth. He gets paid to remind us what a man is for. The rest of us just don't always have the eyes to see it.